Assalamu alaikum and good morning to Madam Asma and all my friends. Our focus today is the inflation in Zimbabwe. Let me introduce you to my awesome members. First up is Fairuz Hanani binti Muhammad Firdaus, Muhammad Zafrullah bin Muhammad Zain, Fatin Nur Shahira, Fatima Al-Zahra binti Kamal, and Fatin Christina Kamalin binti Muhammad Fuad. Today, our primary goal is to present introduction, analysis from year 2019 to 2021, approaches to overcome, and conclusion. Now, let's move on to our main discussion. Started with introduction. Let's get to know Zimbabwe. As you can see here, get to know Zimbabwe. The location is on southern Africa, bordered by South Africa, Botswana, Zambia and Mozambique. The latest population is 16,665,409 people. And for the political structure, they use a parliamentary democracy. Head of state, which is president. Head of government is prime minister. For the economic overview, they use a mixed economy, which is a government strongly control the economy, and also their membership is SADC and COMESA, COMESA.
Zimbabweans will be heading to the polls to elect a president, members of parliament, and local government officials. Now, despite the upcoming elections, many say there is a slim chance that the political and economic situation will change, with basic commodity costs soaring beyond the reach of many and basic service delivery on the brink of collapse. When he assumed office, President Emerson Mnangagwa said Zimbabwe was open for business. This was meant to signify his departure from former President Robert Mugabe's isolationist approach and open investment opportunities with the international community. After many false starts, the president's administration has doubled down on its efforts to mend relations and improve Zimbabwe's image. However, there seems to be no real solution in sight to address the myriad social and economic woes in the country. Alex Rusero, political analyst, joins me now from Mutare for more on this story. Alex, welcome to News Central Now. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you and good afternoon.
So when the president assumed office, he made many promises to the citizens and particularly to business people in terms of what he campaigned on, and then also the promises he's made to the citizens of Zimbabwe when it comes to the economic challenges. Do you think that the president has lived up to his promises? Has he been able to deliver?
Yeah, I think there have been some slight movement, especially during the initial days of his inauguration between November 2017 to around 2019. There was some modicum of sincerity to what President Mnangagwa had promised. But as years continued to unfold, the crisis that Zimbabwe is entrapped with, it's a crisis of reputation without change. The very same things that Zimbabweans and Zimbabwe experienced under Robert Mugabe, precisely with regards to issues of authoritarian tendencies, authoritarianism, are these very same things that continue to recur. If you look at the way the economy is also dodging the government, this is not new. This kind of recurrence is actually an indicator that we are trapped more in the continuity of the erstwhile days of former President Robert Mugabe. There are a lot of continuities in as much as issues of the economy, issues of the shrinking political space, etc. are concerned.
And interesting enough, when you talk about the shrinking political and civic space, in a few months, the country will be going to elections again. In terms of your observation, what does the playing field look like? Is there some level of equality or even fairness for the opposition political parties and those who may have a difference of opinion from the ZANU-PF?
Yeah, it's very unfortunate because de facto the opposition is banned. If we are to use that term, in de facto terms, the opposition in Zimbabwe is good as banned. It cannot breathe. So in those circumstances, you cannot then expect a free and fair election which passes the credibility test, especially when the government seems to be targeting prominent opposition activists, prominent opposition members of parliament, then to have an election at the backdrop of those said episodes, to have an election with a dark cloud of authoritarianism choking almost everyone, hovering on top of the Zimbabwe's electoral climate, it leaves a lot to be desired. So there's no way you can predict a feasibility of regime change in Zimbabwe under the current circumstances. So we are simply going to experience the same old story. Elections in Zimbabwe have been reduced to a charade where it is more or less voting without choosing. Or if we want to put it that way, it's sort of some choiceless democracy. It's kind of a delayed match. We really know the outcome that come August, President Mnangagwa will be re-sworn in as the president. So those kinds of elections, they render the necessity of elections in Africa in general, and in Zimbabwe is in particular an exhausted idea. Elections are fast becoming an exhausted idea because the historical question of the day in Zimbabwe is that what is it that the 2023 election is going to resolve, which all elections from 1980 have failed? We have the 1980 election, 1990, we have the 1996, 2002, 2008, 2013, 2018, now we are in 2023. So that's the historical question of the day. Do we really need elections in Zimbabwe?
So as you talked about the shrinking space, which we'd also call the opposition and civic space, there have been the arrests of activists, opposition leaders, anyone who really opposes the government as well. But let's talk about the people right now, because at the end of the day, you're saying that it's voting, but it's not choosing. It's voting, but it's not actually having the people elect the president and representatives that they want. How are the people, how are Zimbabweans feeling? Do you expect that they will come out? Or as you said, that it's just now an exercise that is not truly democratic? Will they just stick at home and see it through, just grin and bear it to the end of another tenure?
Yeah, Zimbabweans have mastered the art of realizing or coming to terms with the reality that they are on their own. Under normal circumstances, you would realize that the state should perform its Aristotelian functions of delivering the public goods. But Zimbabweans are paradoxically living outside the state in terms of expectation, in terms of alleviating themselves from the miseries that they find themselves in. So Zimbabweans are on their own, the government is on its own, and unfortunately the opposition also is on its own. There is a broken system in as much as issues of national consensus is concerned. So you have a national consensus that is broken. You also have a nationalist project that ushered the Zimbabwean state, which is currently facing a threat, an existential threat. So everything is haywire. It's out of order. So it's not really about the people, because Zimbabweans, they are kind of a resilient people when it comes to issues of survival, issues of existence. And the unfortunate part is that they have learned that they can exist outside the state to the extent that only those who are very idealistic, they find solace in elections, in politics, etc. But majority of the people, they have resigned in despair.
All right, Alex Lucero, political analyst, joining me from Zimbabwe. Thank you so much. We'll continue, of course, to follow up to the lead up to the elections in Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Sure.
And we.
To kick off our analysis from 2019 to 2021, so here is analysis of inflation in Zimbabwe 2019, which is the first is demand pull inflation, which is demand pull inflation occurs when the overall demand for goods and services surpasses the total supply, resulting in price increases. In Zimbabwe, inflation has arisen due to a combination of factors, and while demand pull inflation has played a crucial part in the issue of Zimbabwe inflation. Second, unstable currency, which is a major currency crisis that affected Zimbabwe in 2019 was caused by the abandoning of the bond notes, which had been used as a substitute currency, and also to solve the nation's economic problem. The government chose to reinstate the Zimbabwean dollar as the official medium of exchange. 3. Monetary policy. One major contributing factor to inflation was Zimbabwe's central bank's money management procedures, particularly with the method of funding government spending. When the government ran out of money, the government would approach the central bank to print more currency. Next, foreign exchange shortage, which is the country discovered that it is extremely difficult to import necessities like food and petroleum from other countries. Zimbabwe is unable to import as much food and petroleum as it requires due to the scarcity. Other than that, fiscal deficit, which is the government used two main approaches to reduce the fiscal deficit, which are borrowing and printing cash. The money supply increased rapidly then the amount of goods and services produced result in inflationary pressure. Second last is through an agriculture issue, which is Zimbabwe experienced severe drought in 2019 with very little rainfall. Due to little rainfall, major plants such as wheat had lower than normal harvest. Zimbabwe has to import more food from other countries to make up for this, and prices often increase when a large number of people want to purchase goods from other countries. Last but not least, political and economic uncertainty, particularly with regard to property rights and land reform plans. Controversial land reform in Zimbabwe past have raised concern about property rights and the rule of law. Capital flight occurs when investors relocate their funds to safer and more stable locations as a result of this loss of trust. So let's continue with 2020, which is the first is excessive money printing, mostly caused by the government extensive printing of cash to pay budget shortfall. The government print more money to meet its costs, which resulted in excess of money flooding the market. Second, international sanctions, which is Zimbabwe access to international financial market and foreign investment has been limited by international sanctions. The country difficult to get foreign loan, engage in foreign direct investment, and from alliance with international financial organizations lack of confidence of population and investors. People and companies are hesitant to hold onto local currency as an asset of value in unbalanced economy and hyperinflation situation. Third is hyperinflation expectation. This, this situation happens when consumer, organization and people all tend to expect price rise in the future once inflation rates are continuously high. Their behavior is influenced by this expectation, which might result in behavior like stockpiling items in preparation of future price increases. Last, worldwide COVID-19 pandemic, global supply chain disruptions caused by the pandemic affected Zimbabwe's capacity to acquire basic supplies and raw material. Lockdown and other measures to stop the virus spread resulted in a significant drop in economic activity, which had an impact on industry including manufacturing and agriculture. The government responded to the pandemic economic concern by increasing funding to assist affected individuals and companies. Lastly, in 2021, which is the inflation decrease year, the first is economy recovery, where inflation in Zimbabwe experienced a decrease due to implementation of substantial economic reform in Zimbabwe, including change to monetary and fiscal policy as well as structural modification, which may be essential to reducing the ongoing problem of inflation in 2021. Second is external economic factor, which is Zimbabwe export earning growth in response to an increase in global commodity price, which would improve the country's financial situation and lessen inflationary pressure. This is the inflation rate graph, which is 2019, 2022, and 2021. As you can see, 2019 they got 255.31%, 557.20% for 2020, and last 98.55% on 2021. Now that we have established the groundwork, let's delve into the actionable approaches to overcome address Zimbabwe hyperinflation crisis. We'll be looking at six key strategies that encompass fiscal and monetary policies, economic diversification, corruption control, seeking international assistance, and ensuring exchange rate stability. First is fiscal policy to tackle hyperinflation, identify and cutting unnecessary expenditure. For streamlining the budget, focusing on critical areas that drive economic stability. For instance, the government would scrutinize spending patterns, reallocating funds targeted strategically to stabilize the economy. Moving on to monetary policy, rising interest rate as a measure to discourage borrowing and spending. Strict control over the money supply to curb unchecked currency issuance. As an example, the central bank might announce double-digit interest rate to effectively reduce the money supply. Economic diversification is crucial to reduce dependence on specific sectors. Include substantial investment in tourism, technology, and manufacturing. by doing so to create a more resilient and balanced economic landscape. For example, the government might actively promote industry beyond the traditional focus on mining and agriculture. Next is corruption control, which is implement transparent governance and anti-corruption measures. Example, establish an independent anti-corruption council for oversight. Next is international assistance, which is exploring financial aid from organizations like the IMF and collaborating with international experts for technical assistance. For instance, engage with the World Bank will open for loans tied to essential economic recovery. Last is exchange rate stability. For maintaining a stable exchange rate and implementing a well-managed float system. As an example, the central bank will regularly adjust the exchange rate based on economic conditions. In conclusion, Zimbabwe's experience with hyperinflation serves as a poignant reminder of the profound impact economic mismanagement can have on a nation. The consequences of unchecked inflation, including widespread poverty and a loss of confidence in the currency, highlight the crucial need for sound fiscal policy and responsible governance. Moving forward, Zimbabwe must prioritize stability, transparency, and international collaboration to pave the way for a more secure and prosperous future.